Hello, everyone tuning in, and welcome to the San Diego Short Film Festival long form interview edition. I'm here today with the writer and director of the short film Darcine's Day, Aaron Goffman, who is also just truly fascinating human being. Aaron, hello, how are
Hey,
you?
fine, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Well, I'm really excited to dive in and to talk about Darcine's Day. I found Darcine's Day being a multi-layered film. There is a lot to talk about, and we can look at the film from really different angles and talk about it for hours. So, I guess I would love to start our conversation with the question around what first moved you to tell the story?
I think the first motivation for the story was simply to find an interesting character.
Mm.
And um, I looked at a few different ideas and characters, but the idea of meeting and talking to people who are experiencing homelessness became fascinating. And upon meeting some of my neighbors and doing research on the subject of homelessness in the big city, it just sort of became clear that a female experiencing homelessness would be a fascinating character.
Yeah.
That was the motivation for finding this character. But to be clear right from the start, it wasn't I'm not a documentarian and it's not a documentary, and certainly didn't set out, and my purpose is not to change the world, but to create interesting drama and interesting stories.
Mm.
And I personally believe that, the world is changed by good stories, but the objective was not to change the world.
Most definitely. It's very interesting because definitely a film feels like something that informs people and really allows you to see one glimpse of a story, like one story, and really explore that story.
Well, we try to be the idea for me and my style as I'm learning it is honesty and realism. And it's just interesting. Another thing that I've learned and observed through the process of making this film is the more sort of documentary or real a drama seems, kind
Mhm.
of the more believable it is.
Yeah, interesting.
Mhm.
Um, I'm really curious about who Darcine is to you. Beyond her circumstances, what quality do you want audience to see in her?
I think they're seen as a character is in every woman. That's the character I see in her. I see her as like in every woman where she's honest and trying her best and has integrity
Mhm.
and has faults, but sort of embodies that sort of human spirit that I think we all have in us.
Most definitely. I truly, watching her, found some pieces of myself in her, or something that I could definitely.
I've had that comment from people of all ages, frankly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very true. Because we also get to see a lot of her story and from the different angles and perspective. Um, and I also found it very interesting watching the film for the first time. I was genuinely surprised by the reveal that Darcine is living in her car. Because just like you said, she carries herself with lots of sophistication and composure and hope, and she's very truthful to who she is, but she doesn't necessarily, reveals or she shows her vulnerability, but she never reveals um, her full self. That's how I felt. Um, What did you, as a writer and director, want to reveal about people who perhaps hide their struggles behind dignity or who perhaps feel they have to hide it?
Well, the uh, the the when I was researching in meeting some of my neighbors who are experiencing homelessness, something came to light for me that I had never thought of or heard of before or given it a name, and it's a thing called hidden homelessness.
Mhm.
And it's a phenomenon that happens quite often, which is another reason I cued on it because it seems to be more prevalent than I would imagine, where people who are experiencing homelessness are functioning or trying to function in our society to survive. And what I realized is that many people who just can't find housing are still working at jobs or going to school or trying to do those things. So, the double whammy that they experience in their life is needing to take care of their housing and their living situation, but also appear to be housed, appear to be quote normal, so they can stay employable.
Yeah.
So, when it's that much harder to take care of personal hygiene and things like that, and clean clothes, etc., and still show up to work on time and and do a job, it's like a double struggle.
Yeah, and it's really impressive that people can do that. And it's
Well, that's
what
kind of the idea, that what these people are doing is actually very impressive. And, we should be impressed by their ability and gumption and strength to do it. So,
yeah. And I do notice, throughout the film, something that I was thinking a lot about the fact that there is so much that's happening to a person. There is so much to the story of a single person. And we never really, we might not always know what really happening behind the scenes of that person, behind what the full picture of that person's story. I'm curious about what was perhaps the research process like, or you mentioned that you were talking to people about Darcy, like how you want to depict Darcine. How did you specifically, what was the process like of coming up with making sure that you're highlighting her whole life, but also exactly what she is portraying to those people that she's meeting versus what she is not necessarily bringing and showing to the table?
well, that's an interesting question. I think one of the good things about storytelling in general is that um, we tell bits and pieces about a character and about a story, and the audience fills in the gaps and with their imagination and life experience. And I think that's true with all characters. And but in this case, looking for food, looking for housing, looking for a job. I think those are three, primal level needs that we have as humans. But I think the audience fills in the gaps in between and makes assumptions about the rest of her life, which is a great kind of fun tool of storytelling where we don't have to show all those things, but the imagination of the audience fills in the blanks. And when they start using their imagination, we're able to lead them down a path of assumptions. And um, so for me, the thing that I try to stick with was just keeping each situation, each scenario as real as possible and believable as possible, and try as hard as I can to avoid cliche.
Yeah, I definitely felt that as an audience member. It was very truthful, very real, and very raw. Um, and I do notice that throughout the film we have this different scenes, and I feel like as an audience member, maybe there is a scene that you particularly connect with or find very interesting to look into. And there was this scene in the film, the job interview scene, that really stayed with me personally.
Hmm.
And there is this moment when the tone shifts in the scene. So through your writing, I really felt that The weight of how speaking one's truth can come with consequences. And for Darcine's, the consequence of her being very real and honest was not getting the job. Um, what were you exploring about perhaps biases or the way institutions evaluate people in moments like that? How did this scene also came about to be?
Again, it's another great and very deep question. I think in general we are always like actors on a stage in our daily, meetings with people. In a restaurant, we play a role of customer or waiter. In a job interview, we play the role of a person who has a job to give and a person who wants a job. So we're always playing these roles, and same with like trying to find a place to live, trying to find out if the place is right for me, but also appear attractive to the person renting or selling the place to make them want us. So this interesting dance that we do as humans, which I see almost in every interaction, even right here, sort of now in this interaction, we play roles, and so it's fun to explore those roles in storytelling, and um, and I think you know the teachers in that particular scene, the teacher's position is, can I trust this person with my students, or will she leave when a better job comes along? So the
Mm.
dynamic sort of is one person saying, I really need the job and I need the money and I'll do whatever it takes. And the other person is saying, well, if you need the job that badly, I'm not going to hire you because you might not, you might leave if something better comes along.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky situation that we find ourselves in. And usually the best we can do is be honest, but sometimes, sometimes people who lie get ahead, which is kind of an interesting thing about human nature.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mention it. And that for me really brings that understanding that we all always carry our own monologue or stories that we tell ourselves about perhaps this conversation or this interaction or other people and what this person perhaps wants and need. And you mentioning that perspective, because in my head it was different how I saw that scene. Um, and you talking about it gave me a very different perspective of how people interact and why they say or they choose to do what they choose to do. So it's fascinating.
Well, it is fascinating. And if you think about I mean, as many as stories and films and shows that I can imagine, it seems like, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like 90% or more are two people talking. And most scenes, most information is conveyed through two people talking, that ping pong back and forth. And dialogue is action. It's a thing that a character does as a reaction to something else. Um, but um, but that's how we like build our community, through two people talking. And so it's just an interesting way to reveal character, and it can be manipulated, and that's what we do when we write, sort of send it in one direction or another, to get the point across. So
Yeah.
I'm
And
glad you enjoyed that scene. A lot of people responded well to the different scenes, like you say, which was really kind of cool and gratifying. But each one has its strengths. When the teacher in that scene says, "I think we're looking for someone younger," I mean, I knew that was a little bit on the edge of what would someone would actually say, but it's what she's feeling, that, this woman, in other words, Darcine is overqualified. It's another way of saying overqualified, which I don't think anyone has ever said to me, they're looking for someone younger, but I have heard, in job interviews, someone being told, or me being told, I'm overqualified. So in a way, it's sort of like saying, you're too old, or we want someone younger.
yeah.
So but many people remember that line, and even sometimes in the audience they'll yell out, "Go that bitch," you know, or something.
Yes.
So at least we get a reaction.
You definitely, as a writer, use a very powerful language. I feel like the dialogues and even the conversation that you write definitely stays with audience. At least that was the case with me.
Glad to hear it. Thank you for saying that.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And as we were talking about the scene and relationship and people, another thing that came through my mind is mentioning the dinner scene.
Mm.
Because I know that was one of the most significant moments in the film as well. And I understand that it shifted through a suggestion from Kyla Diane Kennedy, who is portraying Darcine. Um, how did her insight shape the emotional truth of that moment, especially around Darcine's boundaries? Um, her refusal to enter romantic relationship or dependent relationship in order to be in this secure position.
The another thing that I learned about in my research was the concept of survival sex.
Mhm.
And everybody that I spoke with who is living in some aspect of home or living with some aspect of homelessness um, has encountered this issue and has to come to terms with this issue, where because they find themselves in what appears to be an extremely vulnerable position and in a position of much need. So the dynamics of human relations seems to be off balance, and so humans being who they are, the idea, the concept of sex comes up kind of frequently. And some people do resort to, trading sex for certain food or security or other things. And some people don't do that. But everybody has had experience with that issue because they're at a level where they've got to confront these issues. And so that concept of survival sex was fascinating to me and very real. And so I thought it would be good to include that in our story.
Mhm.
And what Kyla did was she saw the whole script, at the script as a whole, and saw subtlety and nuance in all of the storytelling, which made me feel good that she saw that or that she appreciated that. And then she felt that this concept of survival sex was like coming in with a sledgehammer.
Mhm.
It'd be coming in with just the heavy artillery to kind of just like blow the audience out of the water.
Mhm.
And at first, as a writer, I thought, oh, this is awesome. You're gonna have something big, something giant, something really heart-wrenching and emotional. And Kylie just sort of had the feeling that, you know, everything within limits, kind of bring the range down rather than trying so hard to be so big or, so high or so low. So her idea was to eliminate something that would have perhaps been very distracting. And I didn't quite see it at first, and we actually butted heads, which was fascinating for as a director and a lead actress. We kind of butt heads, but in the end, I decided to just trust her. To my credit, I guess I could say to her credit mostly.
Yeah.
But what I did right was I just trusted her, and and she was 100% correct. And I think this film is better for it because she helped me bring it down to more of like more of an even dynamic range, so we weren't going so high and so low.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I apologize. It definitely, as you even speak about it, it's fascinating to hear how that came about. And it definitely, for me as an audience member, felt like the right choice because of the way Darcin is and how she carries herself. And um,
The hinting, I think that scene hinted toward that possible relationship. And I think just like in the genre of horror, the hinting towards something that's maybe in that case horrific or scary
Yeah.
is sometimes a lot more uh, effective than showing it.
Mm,
Because, in other words, using the imagination of the audience of what it could be or what it could mean, that's a much you'll never be, as a filmmaker, we can never paint that big of a picture, regardless of the budget. So to use the audience's imagination to tell the story, it's a great tool, and I think we hit on that in that scene because, the comments, like, for example, when it's streaming and people comment on it, they're just all over that scene,
mm,
and wondering what it meant, what happened, that they feel good and bad. And, it's just so interesting that it hit a nerve.
most definitely. And what I've noticed through our conversation and what's really eye-opening to me is you as a writer and director, very powerful when it comes to telling just enough story to
Well, the,
highlight or hint something.
well, the film business has always been a business of not enough money. No matter how much you have, it's never enough. If you have 1 million, you want it to look like 5 million. If you have 100 million, you want it to look like two. It's never enough money. So we have to, and we can't paint the whole picture of the whole world. We can only paint just this small little piece of it. So the idea is to use the imagination to fill in the gaps. And I think all great films do that. And I try to do it as much as I can to, engage the imagination of the audience and sort of tell the story on that battleground, like sort of fight the fight in their imagination.
Yeah, and I definitely felt as an audience member uh, that I have to use my imagination and to see the whole picture, to see the full story. And then you come up with yours, and then you can talk to the rest of the audience and really see what different stories we all have created. And it can truly be very, very different. So
Which
definitely.
is why is it? Which is why when we write our and create our own films, it's kind of a trap to avoid, which is trying to figure out what everything means, because
Mhm.
you can never really know. And I think a painter or a sculptor, they don't really think about how people are going to respond when they walk up to the sculpture. They just know they have to put it up there on the pedestal. They just have this feeling, I have to make this and put it on this pedestal. But you got no idea. One person's going to see it and see, the agony of war. The other's going to see joy of rebirth. Whatever. It's impossible to understand, which is just the beauty of art and filmmaking is, you put it out there and people respond. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think it definitely feels and carries lots of different emotion. There is sadness and grief, and then there is hope and
Mhm.
wonderful and happiness, and just so many different sensations, so many different colors, and to your film specifically as well. So I do think I want to talk about cinematography now
Mhm.
and the choices. I found cinematography choices being very, colorful and alive, very specific as well, I think. And I do feel like it brings a contrast to the story. Because sometimes I felt like the story and the writing is leaning more towards perhaps quieter feelings or closer to perhaps grieving sensation at points, while cinematography is really, really bringing that hope and liveliness and joy to some extent to the film. Was that contrast intentional?
Interesting. I think the color is also subjective, just like storytelling. And colors and color or absence of color represents different things to different people. Um, I did try to make the movie look very natural and real. And what I know from my experience working in the film business is, that takes a lot of work to make something look very natural. Um, so that's what we were trying for. I see the colors in this film to be slightly muted.
Mhm.
You're describing it as colorful. And that's why I say colors are subjective. I think everyone has their own opinion. What I was going for was mix, if you're a painter at all, just mixing in black, a little bit of black with all the colors. So everything's a little
Mhm.
darker than real.
Mhm.
Um, and and I'm a LA, Los Angeles native, and those are in that film, those are the colors that I see LA, sort of like burnished and a little dark, maybe a layer of smog on everything. There's colors with a layer of smog on top of it. Um, uh, if you saw more colorful than that, like I said, I think it's subjective, and I can't really explain other than it looked very real to me.
It
And
really, mhm.
yeah, it looked very real, but maybe it can be interpreted as colorful too, and that's to me that's fascinating, but I really can't explain it.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. To me, it looked really colorful, but it didn't take away from the reality and realness of it. Um, it definitely felt like that kind of, to me, it felt like that kind of combination of being very real,
Well,
but
what's interesting is the world is extremely colorful,
yes.
and in planning, expanding this story into a feature film, which I'm actively doing, thinking about looks that are going to carry, the story for 2 hours, and a story that actually the feature script takes place over quite a long time, not just a day. Um, and we for that to stay interesting, we need color, we need a color plan, and in our daily world, from sunset to the blue sun, from the sunrise, I should say, to the blue evening, to the color of fire and the color of water and the color of neon. I mean, we're bombarded with colors a lot.
Sure.
So in a way, it's kind of keying into the realness of Los Angeles.
Mm.
And but got to be careful that it doesn't get too colorful too. I mean, there's certainly colors that are like not permitted in my palette. One of them is, for example, you know, um, fluorescent colors. I don't like those colors. So another person might say fluorescent colors are great. They're fine to include, but I would never put fluorescent orange or fluorescent green. So anyway, it's interesting color, and I'm really glad you cued on it, and it had an effect on you.
Yeah, most definitely. Because you know, I feel like for myself, most of the time, if you are in that space where you're feeling down, or when you're feeling sad or depressed, or something happening that's very hard to process, even if you are surrounded by colors, it definitely feels like they're dimmed and they don't feel colorful. They feel like more like black and white.
I think it's interesting. I think we may have hit on that in that grocery store scene. She's surrounded by colorful packages, and that's, I think, for me, that's a great example of the colorful world we find ourselves in. But still, even within all that color, there's something depressing about grocery stores in general. I can't really put my finger on it, but just kind of like color, 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 look, look, look. But there's also the unspoken part of going to the grocery store, which is you can't afford all of this. You know, you
Sure.
can't afford everything you see. You can only pick a few things, and um, if you don't pick this product, you don't pick me, you're wrong. If you don't pick me, you're wrong. This kind of noise of color, and so I was happy that we had a scene in a grocery store because for me, she was sort of lost in all that color. So that was very specific. Yeah.
As we're talking about colors and cinematography, something that you just mentioned as well is the fact that you wanted to make sure the film is as real as possible and the audience really see that reality of it. And to me, the film was full of realness and full of those, particularly where I saw this realness is in all those small moments and intimate moments and pauses and routine that you would show. It's like, you really see that that is something that people everywhere around the world are doing. Um, so I wanted to ask you about why were those fragments and moments are essential to include.
Well, I think we as humans communicate, in different ways, obviously, and words are the most, words are one way to communicate, but we communicate through looks and gestures, and sometimes, and words, in a way, you can even say that words are inefficient. They're not the most efficient way to communicate because words can be interpreted in different ways, and and words have different meanings to different people. I could say I'm happy about what happened yesterday. That could mean I'm happy about it or I'm not happy about it. So uh, so the unspoken gestures are another way to communicate. Um, and I think we have to remember to allow space for them when we're filming, when we're making films, to allow space for them. Because, it's a way that humans communicate, and there's a lot of meaning in expression. And so we got to remember to include that in our storytelling. And really, if there's anything that film is better at than novels,
Yeah,
it's showing those unspoken moments. I mean, you can't really do it in a novel. You let a blank stare last for 4 paragraphs in a novel, but you can let it last for, 30, for 12 seconds on film. So let's use that.
yeah.
I just heard about a technique that another director uses that I'm going to make sure I try next time, which is
Mhm.
after she gets all of her coverage on a certain angle,
Uh-huh.
she does one more take with no words at all. Like, for example, if I was going to communicate with you right now and I just said nothing, something's coming through. And
Yeah.
so what she does is she takes a moment to, like, like you say to actors, do it one more time and throw it away or try something new. This is like, okay, let's do one with no words at all.
Mhm.
Express everything that happens in the scene, but you can't say one word. And I think it's a fascinating technique to remind everybody to take time to include those expressions. The other thing that happens, I find when I'm writing, is I find that sometimes I overwrite because I want to make sure the reader knows what I'm thinking and what the character is thinking.
Mm.
But it's difficult and it's hard to remember to, sometimes those reactions don't have to be written. And but sometimes as a writer, we write them because we want to make sure I can't write a scene where no one says anything. It's kind of tricky. It's kind of like you want to
Yeah.
express a story without words, but you can't write a story without words. So again, that's the thing that differentiates filmmaking from writing. And so we need to remember to use that. And then I think are, I think this is what actors are trained in. You're an actor, maybe you can correct me or illuminate this idea, but I think this is what actors learn to, like, go express emotion and thought without so many words.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I think part of the job as a director sometimes is just to get out of the way and let them do it.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I want to make sure I get the best out of my actors and just let them do their thing.
Yes. Well, what I can definitely say as an audience member, and when um, if I'm looking from the lens of an actor, if I'm watching a film from the lens of an actor, one of my favorite thing is always to really witness those moments where there is no dialogue, and perhaps you are just looking at a person who is expressing and telling the whole story purely through their eyes or through this routine stuff or something like that. So it's definitely something that I personally found incredible, and definitely one of the reasons why I love films so much is because there is that. And that is always the case for the film. Without that, you can't really fully
Well,
have.
humans, you know, the worst thing that a writer can do, I think, ever, the biggest sin is on the nose dialogue.
Mhm.
And we talk about it a lot, and everyone understands the idea, but it's very hard to write not on the nose because we want to convey what we're trying to say with the words. But it's sort of like if you want to say something very important, the worst thing you can do is say it. If you really want to say something really important, then don't say it. And it's kind of weird and upside down, but it's kind of human nature. And and it's it's a trick to writing that I'm learning and I trying and starting to understand. And you know, I think that's kind of the magic of getting to work with actors is I think they're quite a bit ahead of me on understanding this you know, nonverbal communication. And I think it's fascinating because it's so real.
True, true. I do find that we as human beings most definitely communicate through both language and through body language and through our physicality, through the moments of silence. I feel both are very powerful. And what I notice about your film is that you have this beautiful balance of both. You have all these moments, and it definitely felt to me very effective because there is a lot of balance of that. So I wanted to ask you about your writing process and how do you bring that? Because you mentioned that you write a lot and then you rewrite it. What's your writing process like? How do you get
Well,
to that
it's sort
point?
of yeah, it's it's a work in progress. I'm learning and trying, and writing the feature film has been quite a task um, in learning. Um, I guess my process, maybe if I could step back, I would say maybe my process is when I first write, the dialogue is too on the nose,
Mhm,
and then I revise to bury the meaning in less words
mhm,
and less on the nose dialogue. Maybe it's the genre that I find myself in, which I'll call drama, is maybe the most difficult. I think in
mhm,
horror, you know, there's not a lot of subtext to, you know, get out of the house, he has a gun. You know, there's not a lot of subtext to that, or, you know, and same with action, you know,
mhm,
or intrigue or, you know, adventure. I don't know. There's not a lot of you know, he who shall go forth shall perish at the hands. You know, I'm not sure how much subtext there is in those kind of adventure stories, but in drama, which I think is closest to our real human daily experience, you know, in the current day, um, you know, everything is so there's volumes of things unspoken about class and attraction and race and prejudice. I mean, these things are just, you know, there's volumes and tons of things unspoken. And that's the thing we talk about in trying to polish the dialogue is there's the spoken and then there's the unspoken. And then there's the third level, which is the unspeakable. You know, the words that I come out of my mouth are the spoken, but the things that am not saying are really what the story is about. And then there's the unspeakable. The things are so deep down that I don't even have access to those feelings, but they're affecting me. Like um, my mother punished me when I was a kid, or you know, I didn't get to, you know, I have trauma from something that happened, but I it's in there in informing everything I do and say, even at this very moment. But I don't have access to it. consciously. So, but I think characters in fiction, they have to have all those three layers. And so, it's tricky. It's tricky to create dialogue and characters because it's not just, invent a character and put the words in their mouth that you want them to say.
Yeah,
So it's tough.
I understand that. Yeah. But I feel like when you get it as a writer, it truly speaks the volume
Yeah.
and direct.
That's the idea. That's the idea to have the, I guess the subtext come through without having to say it. And again, I can't speak to other genres, but it seems like in drama, that's the name of the game. That's what makes a good drama versus a bad drama.
Yeah.
A lot of films we see, and a lot of short films we see, we have something what I call short filmitis,
Mhm.
where dialogue is just too on the nose. And I think we've all had that moment. I mean, I don't have a criticism for anybody else's short films because they're all so beautiful, such an expression of passion and ideas. But the beginners sometimes, have on the nose dialogue where people just say exactly what the story's about. And I think we all, in a way, sort of roll our eyes like, no, that's not how you do it. You don't say exactly what's happening. You let us figure out what's happening so we can be engaged.
That's
And I
it.
think that's kind of the hook of storytelling is let the audience be engaged and have to figure out where they are and find their bearing.
Most definitely. And was it difficult for you to put a like finish the project and say this is how it's gonna sound, and now we're going into production? Or was it something that you like,
Script,
yeah, finish the script?
the script, yeah. Um, yes,
Mm.
yes, it's difficult. It's difficult all along the way. It's difficult because you don't know if you're doing the right thing. You don't know if you're making a mistake. You don't know, there's so many things you don't know. But for me, at least, the guiding lights are beacons are trying to keep things very real. I
Mhm.
think the thing about realism in drama, in fact, someone called the genre of our short film social realism, in which I thought that was a fascinating compliment, but also just a fascinating idea. I never really heard the term social realism. Um, but I think it's kind of like a lot of films we've seen, especially films that have to do with historic events, even the documentary, this films like Bohemian Rhapsody, about a band. We see these films and we just sort of assume, oh, that must be the way the story was. That must be the real story of Queen. That's the story because I saw Bohemian Rhapsody. Of
Yeah.
course, it's not. It's not really the real story, but I think the filmmakers, and I've worked on as a property master, I've worked on films that have historic reality, like a Michael Jackson
Yes.
film. I worked on the TV show Monsters with featuring infamous serial killers. And I think what we try to do in these period pieces is make them as real as possible. I mean, down as a prop master, down to the exact same glasses that the person wore, or the same suitcase luggage, or the same hairstyle that they had. And the effect of all that is the audience, I think, the mind just at one moment clicks over into accepting that as real. And so, because those visual cues are there, then we just all of a sudden, like, we're, hook, line, and sinker on the ride and
Yeah.
can't get off. And so I think as filmmakers, that's what we try to do is get our audience engaged like that. And we use whatever trick we can to do it so they can enjoy the ride.
Most definitely. It's
Mhm.
fascinating. And you mentioned that you're working on a feature film,
Yes.
feature version of the story. So I'm most definitely very interested in how do you see these themes that already you touched upon in Darcine's Day short film expanding in the feature film?
Um, what I've learned so far is writing a feature film is like writing a symphony for 100-piece orchestra. Because there's at least 100 threads in the story between characters, plots, subplots, even continuity of props. The prop comes up at the beginning and comes back at the end. That's like one staff of the conductor's score that has a bunch of rests in between. So it comes up here and comes up there, but it has to be tracked the whole way. It's just extremely complex the way it all web weaves together. So that's why it's taken me, frankly, a year. And I say taken because I'm very close, even today and tomorrow, to finishing it, and putting it out there. But the themes from the short film, well, in Darcine's Day, people would come to me at screenings and they would say, "What happens next for Darcine? I hope she makes it." That's one of the comments. I hope she makes it, and I think um, I think she's going to make it, but in the same way that she does in the short film, which is we're left with a feeling of hope and human survival.
Yeah. And
But what I had to do in the feature film is I had to rewind the story back to she before she's in the situation we see her in the short film. So I had to rewind it back and show all the steps that led her to where she is now.
yeah. Hmm. So interesting, fascinating. I'm really looking forward to the feature.
Well,
I
thank you.
truly,
Be out
truly.
there in the world very soon.
Yes.
At least the script, yes. And we have some people interested in producing it, which is exciting. Our technique, yeah, our strategy is to, start with as strong a script as possible
Mhm.
before we launch it into the world.
That's brilliant. I'm so looking forward to it.
Yes, thank you.
Um, I do. You mentioned that the ending, the closure, is that hope point. And so I cannot not mention it because it's another one of my favorite moments in the films is, at the end, um, you chose the song, New Places, New Moments, written by Bess DeBacchi and Duncan Brookfield. Um, and there's this car, you close on the car parked on the Hope Street. And to me, that felt very uplifting and very intentional and very hopeful and very promising. And there's just a lot. It's like you leave the audience on that very beautiful note that is kind of free falling or easefulness. There is that kind of feeling inside of you as an audience member. So what did you want the final emotional notes to hold for the audience?
Well, I think that humans are awesome. I think people are awesome. People are survivors. They survive. They make themselves better. They come up with solutions, and that human perseverance and that hope, that feeling of hope.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's just a beautiful aspect of human nature, and maybe you can even say that all stories. I mean, I guess it's possible to say that all stories have hope as an ending. Like, like even in a story where there's like, maybe a horror film where there's all sorts of violent things happening, there's like this hope of survival, hope of the new day, hope of rebirth. So I think hope and human perseverance are themes that are important that we all relate to, but it's not like I have any corner on the market for this idea. I think my opinion is all stories, even all expressions of art, kind of express this idea. Paintings and sculptures too. There's this idea of life is worth living, and there's going to be another day, and people are still having babies every day. Even with how terrible our world is right now, people are still having babies today. New babies are coming who are going to, live and make the world a beautiful place, even with all the crap that's happening on the news and all around the world. So I think hope in Spanish we say esperanza, but just that kind of human, you know, um, hope. And by the way, that we were filmed. There is a Hope Street downtown LA, as you know,
Yeah.
as you may know, um, but we weren't on Hope Street. That was one of the things I had my graphic artist change in the last scene.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, I was thinking maybe I should have had him make it a little bit larger because a lot of people didn't notice it, but it's there, and some people have noticed it, and that's enough for me.
Yes. Yeah. And I
But
loved
but
it.
it is a real street in Los Angeles called Hope Street.
It's beautiful.
Mhm.
And I think now that people have heard of it, hopefully when they rewatching the film, they will notice it. And
Thank you.
yeah, I think it's definitely something that like puts your smile on your face when you notice that.
Well,
Uh,
that's awesome because the story is kind of a downer.
yeah.
It's kind of a downer, but I think, and that's one of the things I learned from the short film and learned by going to the festivals and by hearing people's feedback. One of the challenges in writing the feature film was the foregone conclusion that I'd have some sort of, even in myself, not by others, but in myself, that I'd have some sort of I'll use the term Hollywood ending,
Hmm.
where everything works out in the end. And it's not my style, it's not what I'm interested in personally,
Yeah.
but I had to have some hope at the end, because I don't know. If there's no hope, then why create, Why create if there's no kind of feeling of tomorrow will be a better day.
Yeah.
So my this feature film now as it exists does have a pull up at the end. It does have hope and a happy ending, but it's not save the world, cure the problem, save orphans. It's not march on Washington D.C. and change legislature. It's
Yeah.
kind of a small victory,
Mhm.
but I find my personal opinion and style is that's more real and interesting.
Most definitely. And I think to me, as an audience member, why the film was so powerful is because you touch on the depth and go deep. And there is that heaviness of the story itself, of the life that Darcine is living, uh, while there is that still beauty and hope. And I do think that creativity cannot exist without hope and that light. And the for me, it's just kind of as an audience member, for my personal taste, it's one of my favorite thing that we end even the heaviest story on the hope, but it's never like happy ever after. There is
Yeah.
this because it's very real. That what you do with the film is very real, and I think reality is very powerful. But reality is never either bad, like it's never one color.
No.
It's always
I think that's very thoughtful for you to say those things. I really appreciate it. I think our life, I don't think most people's life is coming out or came out the way they anticipated. But there's love and there's hope and there's a reason to keep living. And like I said, people are having babies. So I remember at one point in my life, and people would say, oh, I'm not going to bring a child into this world. Things are so terrible. But and some people still have that feeling, and that's perfectly fine for them. But people are still having babies. So, meaning there is hope for the future. It will get better, and it's always getting better. So maybe, we've hit on something here that I never quite thought about, which is all films have that theme, and And I mean, even imagine horror and, I don't know, action and everything sort of ends on some feeling of hope, some feeling of, it's going to be okay. Maybe that's why we as humans like stories.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah.
Mhm. So
Well,
thank you. Your questions are so deep and made me think so much. I really appreciate it, and I'm very happy that you uh, dug so deep into the meanings of our short film. I
most
appreciate
definitely.
it.
It's my pleasure. And Aaron, thank you so much for this interview, for answering and diving deep with me and really allowing this conversation to flow and exist and explore. I feel like we're ending now our conversation on this beautiful point where perhaps those who are watching have an opportunity to also think and perhaps question and look at life differently. And
I think that's what we have to do as filmmakers is we have to ask questions. I don't think anybody can really pretend to have answers, but I think we have to ask questions and hold a mirror up to our world and the audience, us people in the theater and all of us in the world, we have to like think about how we want to treat each other, how we want our world to be, how we want to behave. Um, and and I think that's our role as filmmakers and storytellers to ask those questions.
hmm, I love that. And it's truly what all of what you are saying right now, and definitely with your film, Darcine's Day, I feel like it is about providing the audience with the canvas of question filled with questions and let the audience find that answer that is their answer. So definitely Darcine's Day feels like that, honestly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aaron. It's an absolute pleasure. I wish you a beautiful day. Thank you so much again for joining San Diego Short Film Festival.
My
It's
pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
thank you. All right. Um, yeah, thank you so much. I'll see you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.